you are not stressed. And if you feel a slight resistance to that sentence, that's exactly the point. Because what if everything you've been blaming your exhaustion on, your work, your schedule, your responsibilities, your relationships, is only explaining 20% of the problem, and the other 80% is something you've never been told? Look at your life for a second. You wake up tired even before the day starts. You haven't faced any real problems yet, but your body already feels heavy. Your mind feels slightly foggy, like it never fully loads into clarity. And there is this quiet pressure in your chest that never completely disappears. So you do what everyone does. You assume it's stress. But here's where things get strange. If stress was truly the problem, then why doesn't rest fix it? Why does a weekend off not reset you? Why does a vacation only help temporarily before everything comes back? That's the contradiction nobody talks about. Because real stress should be temporary. It should rise, then fall, then disappear. But what you are experiencing is different. It doesn't leave, it just changes shape. Sometimes it becomes exhaustion. Sometimes it becomes irritability. Sometimes it becomes brain fog. Sometimes it becomes emotional numbness. But underneath all of it, the pattern is the same. Your body is not returning to baseline. And that's the 80% most people miss. Not because they are lazy or overthinking, but because they are looking at the wrong system entirely. You are not just dealing with life pressure. You are dealing with a nervous system that has forgotten how to switch out of survival mode. So even when nothing is wrong externally, your body behaves like something still is. And once that happens long enough, normal life starts to feel like quiet suffering you can't explain. But before we go deeper, you need to understand something critical. This is not about managing stress better. It's about understanding why your body never finished stress in the first place. And once you see that mechanism clearly, you will never interpret your fatigue the same way again. Here's the part that changes everything. Your body was never designed to stay in stress. It was designed to move through stress. Fast, clean, and then return to safety. That's the 80/20 truth behind everything you just heard. Because in a natural environment, stress is simple. There is a threat, your system activates. You act. The threat disappears. Your body resets. But your life doesn't work like that anymore. And this is where the real problem begins. You don't just experience stress. You interrupt it. You cut it off halfway. You suppress it. You tell yourself to stay calm, stay productive, keep going. But internally, something very different is happening. Your nervous system is still in response mode. Not thinking mode, not resting mode, survival mode. And here's the hook most people miss. Your body doesn't know the difference between solving stress and surviving it. So when your phone lights up with a name you weren't ready to see, and your jaw tightens before you even think, that is your nervous system already in survival mode. Cortisol rises, heart rate increases, muscles tighten, focus narrows. This is not dysfunction. This is precision biology, and yet you do nothing with it. That tiny micro-reaction, that is your nervous system already entering survival mode before you even think. Cortisol rises, heart rate increases, muscles tighten, focus narrows. This is not dysfunction. This is precision biology, and yet you do nothing with it. You don't fight, you don't run, you don't release it. You just continue your day like nothing happened. So the stress response never completes. And this is the 80% most people never see. Stress is not dangerous because it happens. Stress is dangerous because it doesn't finish. So instead of a cycle, you get a loop. Instead of activation resolution, you get activation, suppression, accumulation. And over time, your body adapts to this unfinished cycle. It stops waiting for resolution. It assumes stress is permanent, which means even on calm days, your system is still slightly activated in the background. That's why rest doesn't feel like rest anymore. That's why silence feels uncomfortable. That's why your mind feels like it's always half on. Not because something is wrong with you, but because your biology has never been allowed to fully exit survival mode. And once you understand this, you stop asking, how do I reduce stress? And start asking the real question, how do I complete stress inside my body again? Here's where everything becomes more subtle and more dangerous. Because if stress was just a loop you could notice, you would have already escaped it. But you haven't. And the reason is not awareness, it is access. Let me explain. Most people think the problem is, I need to calm down, but your nervous system does not operate on instruction, it operates on state. And here is the 80/20 truth. You cannot think your way out of a nervous system state you did not think your way into. That's the hidden trap. Because stress does not start in your thoughts, it starts in your body. And once your body enters a certain physiological state, your brain becomes a follower, not a leader. This is why something confusing happens. You know you are safe, but you don't feel safe. You know nothing is wrong, but your system still won't relax. And that gap between knowing and feeling is where people get stuck for years. Now, here's the part almost nobody realizes. Your brain actively blocks relaxation when it predicts unresolved threat, even if that threat is not real anymore. So, when you try to calm yourself down, your system sometimes resists it. Not because you are broken, but because your biology is prioritizing unfinished protection over comfort. That's why advice like, just breathe, just relax, just let it go, often fails in real life, because the system is not listening to logic. It is listening to signals of completion. And if those signals are missing, your body stays in a cautious, partially activated state. Not full panic, not calm, something in between. A low-level alert mode that feels like tension without cause, fatigue without recovery, anxiety without direction. And here's the key insight. Most people are not stuck in stress. They are stuck in a system that refuses to switch states without a physical resolution signal, which means the solution is not more thinking, not more insight, not more understanding, but something far more basic, something your body has been waiting for this entire time. And once you see what that is, everything from the next section will finally make sense. There is something most people completely misunderstand about stress. They think it's something you get through. Like, time will slowly drain it away. But your body doesn't work like that. It doesn't wait. It responds, instantly. And that response is far more mechanical than emotional. Because stress is not just a feeling, it is a state shift inside your physiology. Your breathing changes before your thoughts do. Your heart rate changes before your awareness catches up. Your muscles tighten before you even have time to interpret what is happening. Which means something important. You are never actually thinking stress into existence. You are entering it through the body first. And this is where things become interesting. Because if stress is a state your body enters automatically, then logically there must also be a way it exits automatically. And there is. But here's the strange part. Most people have experienced it without realizing what it was. That sudden involuntary breath after a moment of overwhelm. That double inhale your body sometimes takes when you feel mentally overloaded. That strange reset sensation after crying or panic. It doesn't feel like a technique. It feels like your system briefly correcting itself. Almost like something inside you tried to restore balance on its own. But then you go back to normal life, and the reset doesn't stick. So you assume it was random. It wasn't. It was your nervous system attempting to complete something that never finished. Because under stress, the body doesn't just activate energy, it also accumulates imbalance in the respiratory and autonomic system. And when that imbalance crosses a certain threshold, the body naturally tries to correct it through a rapid breathing correction response. Not calm, not relaxation. Correction. But here's where the mystery deepens. If the body already has this built-in correction mechanism, why does stress still accumulate in the first place? Why doesn't the system just reset itself every time it gets overloaded? Why do some people feel it clearly, while others barely notice anything happening inside them at all? And, more importantly, what changes between those two states? Because if your body already knows how to exit stress, then the real question is not how to trigger it, but why it sometimes stops responding at all. And that's where everything starts to shift. Here's where the story gets uncomfortable. Because at this point, most people assume something simple. If the body has a reset mechanism, then I just need to use it more. But that assumption is where everything goes wrong. Because the real issue is not that your body forgot how to reset. It's that sometimes it refuses to switch states on demand. And that feels completely confusing from the inside. You've probably noticed this before. There are moments when you feel tense, and then suddenly you take a deep breath and your system drops immediately, like a switch turned off. But there are other moments where the exact same attempt does nothing. You breathe, You try to relax, you try to let go, and nothing changes. So you start thinking, why isn't it working this time? But here's the hidden truth most people never consider. Your nervous system does not respond to techniques. It responds to permission signals. And those signals are not conscious. They are biological. There is a threshold inside your body where stress stops being manageable activation and becomes something else entirely. A protective state. And in that state, your system prioritizes one thing above everything else, continuing protection over allowing release. Which means even natural reset mechanisms can become partially suppressed. Not broken, not gone, just unavailable. And this creates a strange paradox. Because the more stressed you become, the less responsive your system becomes to calming signals. Not because you are doing it wrong, but because the body is now filtering everything through a survival lens. Even signals meant for relaxation. Even signals meant for safety. And this is the part most explanations never go into. Stress doesn't just activate your system. It changes what your system is willing to accept. So when someone says, just breathe, just relax your shoulders, just calm down, it often fails in real life not because the advice is wrong, but because the nervous system is no longer in a state where simple inputs produce simple outputs. It has shifted into a mode where everything is evaluated for risk first, and only after that, response is decided. So even your attempts to reset can be interpreted differently depending on your internal state. Sometimes as safety, sometimes as irrelevant noise, sometimes as something to ignore completely. Which leads to a deeper question. If your body can both reset easily in one moment and resist it in another, and what actually determines the difference? What flips the system from open to recovery, to locked in protection? Because if you can identify that switch, then everything you thought was random about your anxiety suddenly becomes predictable. And if it becomes predictable, it becomes something you can eventually control. But that control is not where most people expect it to be. Let's connect everything for a moment. Because up until now, you might still be thinking stress is something you manage, something you reduce, something you deal with better. But that assumption is exactly why most people stay stuck for years. Because it keeps them focused on content instead of system. And your nervous system is not a content problem. It is a regulation problem. Here's the final shift. Your body is not trying to make you suffer. It is trying to keep you safe using the best model it has available. Even if that model is outdated, even if that model overreacts, even if it now treats normal life like uncertainty. This is why advice rarely lands where it should, because advice targets behavior, but your nervous system operates below behavior. It operates at the level of state selection, and state selection is automatic, which means the real question was never, how do I feel less stressed? The real question is, what tells my body that it is safe enough to stop reacting? And once you see that clearly, everything else becomes simpler. Because every method you've seen, breathing, cold exposure, shaking awareness, was never about fixing stress. They were about sending signals. Signals that say, this moment is not a threat anymore. But when those signals are weak, inconsistent, or incomplete, your system doesn't fully switch. It stays halfway, not in panic, not in calm, just in continuous readiness. And that is what most people normalize without realizing it. A body that never fully drops its guard. A mind that never fully goes quiet. A life that feels slightly heavy for no clear reason. Not because something is wrong, but because the system never received a clean it's over signal. And that's the core truth underneath everything you've just heard. Stress is not removed by thinking less. It is resolved when the body receives enough consistent signals that the threat cycle is finished. And here's what that actually means for you. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not bad at handling stress. You are someone whose system never got the signal that it was allowed to stop. That's it. That's the whole thing. And the moment you stop trying to fight stress and start working with the system underneath it, things don't change dramatically overnight. They change quietly. In the way you breathe without noticing. In the way your chest feels less tight for no reason you can explain. In the way silence stops feeling uncomfortable. That's the kind of change that actually lasts. So here's the only thing I want you to do right now. Save this video, not because it's good content, but because at some point in the next few days, you're going to feel that same background heaviness again. And when it happens, you'll need to remember something simple. There is a reason it feels this way, and it is not permanent. And if this changed the way you see yourself even slightly, then subscribe. Because the next video answers the one question this entire series has been moving toward. What does it actually look like to give your nervous system the safe enough to stop signal in real life, starting in the first 60 minutes after you wake up? You've been carrying this longer than you should have. Now you know why. And now you know it doesn't have to stay.